with our work, I think we believe that if we showed people how we did inclusive and accessible comms, then maybe someone else will also be able to pick that up and understand that they can also do that too. I guess here at the Research for Development Impact Network, or the RDI Network, we have always committed to inclusion and accessibility. That's why, as a network and a community of like-minded international development practitioners, academics, researchers, et cetera, have committed to developing, I guess, free resources to the wider sector to promote best practice. And here at the network, we truly believe that, being able to get together and talk to each other and discuss practice will improve practice. And of course, accessibility doesn't just mean open source or free resources to everyone. It also means being disability inclusive. So whether that means that, all of our resources need to be able to be used or be able to be used by screen readers, or that our social media is accessible to people with disabilities and have captions, or even webinars that we put on are accessible to all. In fact, in 2019, we embarked on a project with our partners, CBM Australia, Nossal, and the Disability Pacific Forum, to develop a really super practical and easy to read guide on how to include people with disabilities in research and evaluation. So RDI's process to, I guess, improving practices to include people with disabilities in our communication was really quite an organic process. In our secretariat, we've always been lucky enough to be staffed by people who do absolutely believe that people with disabilities should always be included, and they've all brought their own experiences and understanding of how to do that to the secretariat and then shared it with the wider, I guess, staff members. And step by step, that's how we've been able to integrate disability inclusion in our standard operating processes. So at the RDI Network, accessible comms means that we use plain everyday language. And that, from a communication standpoint, isn't just for people with disabilities or it's about being inclusive, but it actually just means it's easier to read. That's good for everybody. We also try to use different ways of laying out text and try to use icons and graphics to make sure that people who might be a little bit more visual can understand the documents and what we're writing. We also try to use font that is size 12 and or above. For example, in that project, Research for All, Disability Inclusive Research and Evaluation Guidelines, we've used size 14 text. And we also are really aware that colors and different types of fonts like italics or bold can be really quite difficult for some people to read. So we try to minimize that and try to call out to certain texts or certain parts of documents in a different way. And I guess the biggest tip that we've been able to use is that in the Microsoft suite of tools like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, there is actually a checker. And if you click on that accessibility checker, it will tell you some of the things that you might need to be doing, whether you're doing it right, which gives you a tick on the checker, or a cross, which just means, hey, this needs to be addressed. A key piece of advice that I would give anyone starting on this journey is to do a bit of reading. And there are lots of practical tools out there from places like CBM or Vision Australia on how to make things accessible. And that's not just written communications, but also Zooms and meetings, all sorts of things that could be considered under comms. So I think it is adding a little bit of extra time in your day to just have a think when you're in your planning processes to go, okay, we are also including people with disabilities, and how do we do that? And that's what is that one practical step that I need to include in, getting from A to B. While I think it's a great approach that, all of our different staff members have contributed to our understanding of disability inclusion, I also think that it's actually really important to resource and experts to come in to either do training or help with proofreading or testing. For example, while we always try to ensure that our writing is in plain language, once we turn a document from a Word document into a PDF, we always hire a designer who knows how to lay out an accessible PDF, because that actually is a skill on its own, and not every single graphic designer can actually do that. So we've ensured that we do that, that the PDFs are also accessible. But it's also, training is also a really, really important skill, so that you empower all of your staff members to be able to take on those little steps one by one. As a network of international development practitioners in Australia, the RDI network itself doesn't, deliver programs, but what we do is support best practice. And the best way to support best practice is also to show what you're asking other people to do. So while we don't deliver programs, we do ensure and are working towards making sure that all of our work is inclusive of people with disabilities, because that is best practice. Because the RDI network stands for Ethical Research and Evaluation, which closely, works alongside with the ACFID code, which is all about including everyone. On reflection, I think it doesn't quite matter whether it's a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach on how to be inclusive to people with disabilities. I do think there needs to be passion and commitment from both sides, of course, but I think as long as there is passion from someone and that is communicated to the rest of the organization, step by step, I think people do then keep that on the top of their, mind and actually then start thinking about it. When you put that, whatever work you put out, you start asking yourself, oh wait, is this disability inclusive?